The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Earth's central archives, casting long shadows across the rows of computer terminals. Mi-sun sat hunched over her desk, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard as she searched through decades of historical records. She was a xenolinguist, and her job was to catalog and preserve information about humanity's contact with alien species. It was usually boring work, but today something felt different. She had been digging through old files from the 1980s archives when she noticed something strange. There were gaps in the historical records. Not small gaps, but massive holes where entire years of data seemed to have been removed or hidden. It was like looking at a book where someone had torn out the middle chapters. Mi-sun frowned and leaned back in her chair. This was not normal. "What are you doing here so late?" a voice asked behind her. Mi-sun jumped and turned around. It was her father, Teo, the senior ambassador at the Galactic Concordance Council. He stood in the doorway with a tired smile, holding 2 cups of tea. His face showed the lines of someone who had spent decades dealing with complicated diplomatic problems. He was in his 50s now, but his dark eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made him one of Earth's best representatives to the alien species. "I found something strange," Mi-sun said, accepting the tea gratefully. "There are missing records from 300 years ago. Entire sections of our history just gone." Teo's hand froze for just a moment as he lifted his cup to his lips. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but Mi-sun knew her father well enough to catch it. Something about what she said had made him uncomfortable. "Missing records are not unusual," he said carefully. "Sometimes old data gets corrupted or lost over time." "These were not corrupted," Mi-sun said, turning back to the screen. "These were deleted on purpose. Someone went through and removed references to a species called the Architects. I found the name in 3 different documents, but every time it appears, the next page is blank or classified. It's like someone wanted to erase them from history." The silence that followed was heavy. Teo set his cup down slowly on the edge of the desk. When he spoke again, his voice was different. It was quiet and careful, like someone walking on thin ice. "Mi-sun," he said, "some things are hidden for good reasons. There are secrets that governments and organizations keep because bringing them into the light would hurt people. You need to let this go." Mi-sun turned to face her father directly. "What are you talking about? What secret? What is so terrible about the Architects that their name was erased from our records?" "I said let it go," Teo repeated, and this time his voice carried an edge of something that might have been fear. He stood up and walked toward the window, his back to his daughter. "Do not ask me about this again." Before Mi-sun could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the building. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and sirens wailed across the compound. Both of them froze. In all of Mi-sun's life, she had never heard that particular alarm. It was a security alarm, one that meant something serious had happened. The door burst open and a security officer rushed in. "Ambassador Teo," she said breathlessly, "you need to come with me immediately. The Defense Council is being assembled." Teo and Mi-sun exchanged a glance. Whatever had just happened, it was connected to what Mi-sun had discovered. Mi-sun was sure of it. As they hurried through the corridors toward the Defense Council chamber, they encountered Commander Hyun-ki. He was an old military man, now pushed into ceremonial duties because of his age, but his eyes still held the hardness of someone who had seen real combat. He was talking urgently with several security personnel, but when he saw Teo, he stopped and walked over to meet them. "Teo," Hyun-ki said, his voice low and serious. "The signals are back." Teo's face went pale. "That is impossible." "Is it?" Hyun-ki's eyes shifted to Mi-sun for just a moment, then back to her father. "I told you they would come back someday. I told you we should never have agreed to the silence. But the council wanted to forget." "The world wanted to forget what signals?" Mi-sun asked, looking between the 2 men. "What are you talking about?" Neither of them answered her immediately. They walked together down the hallway, moving quickly toward the main chamber. As they walked, Mi-sun could hear alarms continuing to sound throughout the facility. Her heart was beating fast now. Something was happening, something big, and both her father and Hyun-ki seemed to know what it was. "The monitoring stations in the outer colonies," Hyun-ki continued, speaking directly to Teo as if Mi-sun was not there. "They have detected signals coming from beyond the edge of mapped space. And they are growing stronger. According to the initial analysis, they will reach the inner colonies in less than 2 months." "From where exactly?" Teo demanded. From the direction of the architect's last known position, Hyun-ki replied. After 300 years, they are coming back. The words hung in the air like a physical force. Mi-sun felt her legs go weak. She had been right about her discovery. The architects were real, and they were not just a deleted piece of history. They were something that was significant enough to cause massive alarms and bring military commanders running through the corridors at full speed. They entered the Defense Council chamber, and immediately Tayo was pulled into conversation with Yoon-ji, the head of Earth's Defense Council. She was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and a stern expression. She looked like someone who dealt in facts and strategy, and she did not look happy about what was happening. Mi-sun stood in the corner of the chamber and watched as the adults rushed around, talking in urgent voices about defense systems and signal analysis and something called the original protocols. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick message to Ji-hoon, a communications officer she knew who worked in the signals division. She had a feeling she would need his help to understand what was really happening. The chamber filled with more and more people. Military officers, government representatives, scientists, and diplomats all arrived within minutes. The display screens on the walls lit up with images of space, showing the location where the signals were coming from. It was coming from a direction that most people never even thought about. It was coming from beyond the stars that humans had mapped. Tayo stood in the center of the room, and even though he was not the most senior person present, people kept looking at him and waiting for his opinion. That was when Mi-sun understood something important. Whatever had happened with the architects 300 years ago, her father had been chosen to remember it. He had been chosen to carry this secret, and now, after all these years, the secret was about to come crashing back into the light. The alarms continued to sound. The screens continued to flash with new information. And in the center of all this chaos, Mi-sun watched her father's face and saw something she had never seen before. She saw fear. Not the small fear of everyday problems, but the deep fear of someone who knew that something terrible was about to be repeated. And this time, nobody would be able to hide it anymore. Ji-hoon worked in the signals division, a place filled with computers and monitoring equipment that tracked communications from across human space. He was a young man, brilliant but often reckless in his approach to problems. When he received Mi-sun's message asking him to look at something unusual in the signal patterns, he did not hesitate. He immediately began pulling up the data from the outer colonies. What he found made his blood run cold. The signals were not random or chaotic. They were patterned. Someone or something was broadcasting in a clear mathematical sequence. And when Ji-hoon analyzed the pattern carefully, he realized what it meant. It was a countdown. 40 days. That was how long humanity had before something arrived. Something big. Something that came from beyond the edge of space. Ji-hoon called Mi-sun immediately. "We need to talk," he said. "Not here. Not over the official channels. I think something huge is about to happen, and they are not telling us the complete truth." They met at a small cafe near the university district, a place where young people gathered and where security cameras were less intrusive. Mi-sun arrived first, ordering tea and sitting at a corner table. When Ji-hoon entered, he looked nervous. He kept glancing around as if he was afraid someone was watching him. "The signals are deliberate," Ji-hoon said quietly, sitting down across from her. "They are a countdown. 40 days from now, something is going to arrive. And based on the trajectory and the signal strength, it will reach inner Earth space in 40 days exactly." Mi-sun listened carefully as Ji-hoon explained his analysis. She thought about the files she had found, about the architects, about the fear she had seen in her father's eyes. "Do you know what I found in the archives?" she asked him. She told him about the missing records, about the name that had been erased from history. Ji-hoon's face went pale. "The architects," he said slowly. "The signals are coming from the direction of the architects." At that exact moment, across the city, Yoon-ji was sitting in a closed meeting with the highest levels of Earth's government. She was the head of the Defense Council, which meant that she was one of the few people who knew the complete truth about Earth's past. A man in an expensive suit, someone Yoon-ji recognized as a representative of the Galactic Concordance Council, was giving her orders. "Suppress the information," the man said. "Tell the people it was a false alarm. Tell them the signals were nothing important. The world does not need to know that the architects might be returning. It will cause panic and instability." Yoon-ji listened carefully, but inside she was making a decision. She was tired of the lies. She was tired of the secrets. She was tired of hiding the truth from people who deserved to know their own history. She stood up slowly. "No," she said simply. "Excuse me?" The man looked shocked. He was not used to being told no by military officers. "I said no," Yunji repeated. "I will not suppress this information. The people of Earth deserve to know what is coming. They deserve to understand their own history. I will help you prepare a briefing for the government and for the public. But I will not lie." The man stood up, angry now. "You have no authority to make that decision." "Then fire me," Yunji said calmly. "But I am done with hiding the truth." Within hours, Yunji had called Teo to a private meeting. She brought him into her office and closed the door firmly behind them. Teo knew immediately that something serious was happening. "I need you to tell me everything," Yunji said. "Everything about what happened with the architects 300 years ago. Because I just refused orders to suppress information about their return, and I need to understand what we are dealing with." Teo sat down slowly. For a long moment he did not speak. Then finally he began to tell the story that had been hidden for 3 centuries. "The architects came to Earth during the early days of human space exploration," Teo said quietly. "They were not conquerors. They came as teachers. They wanted to share their knowledge with us, to help us grow faster as a civilization. But our leaders at the time were afraid. They feared that accepting this knowledge would make us dependent on them. They feared that the architects wanted to control us, so what happened?" Hyunji asked. "We attacked them," Teo said, and his voice was filled with shame. "We treated their offer as an invasion. We brought our military ships and we fought them. And we were losing, Unji. We were losing badly. The architects were far more advanced than us and we could not stand against them militarily. So how did it end? We used a weapon," Teo continued. "A terrible weapon. It was developed in secret, and it was used to drive the architects away. The war ended and we pushed them back into deep space. But the price was enormous. We nearly destroyed them. Their civilization was shattered, and after the war, every major power on Earth signed an agreement to never speak of this again. We erased the architects from our records. We pretended they had never existed. And now they are coming back," Yunji said. "Now they are coming back," Teo confirmed. "After 300 years they are coming back. And I do not know if they come seeking revenge or if they come seeking peace." That evening, something remarkable happened. Yunji arranged for an emergency meeting with Kyo-wan, an elderly alien from the Vethari species who had been living on Earth as a peaceful observer for many decades. Kyo-wan was one of the few remaining beings who had actually lived through the original conflict with the architects. He was ancient by human standards, but his mind was still sharp. When told about the signals, Kyo-wan simply nodded as if he had been expecting this for a long time. "I remember," he said quietly. "I remember when the architects came. I remember your fear. I remember your attack. And I remember the sadness in their eyes when they had to leave." "What do you think they want now?" Teo asked. "I do not know," Kyo-wan said. "But I know this. The architects were not a species that lived for revenge. They lived for knowledge and understanding. If they are returning, they must have a reason. But I warn you, Teo, the galaxy will not sit quietly while this happens. Other species will be afraid. Other species will demand action." Over the next few days, exactly what Kyo-wan predicted began to happen. Alien ambassadors from across the galaxy began leaving Earth. The Vethari withdrew their delegation. The Krill merchants packed their transport ships. The peaceful ether species who had lived on Earth for 50 years began their departure procedures. The entire galactic community was pulling away from humanity, as if Earth was about to become contaminated by something dangerous. Meanwhile, Mi-sun and Ji-hoon shared their findings with Teo and Yunji. The countdown continued. Days passed. The government of Earth struggled to decide what to do. Some called for preparation of weapons. Others called for surrender. Still others, including a growing number of ordinary citizens, called for peace. The world waited. The countdown continued. And everyone knew that in just a few weeks the architects would arrive, and nothing would ever be the same again. The silence that had lasted for 300 years was about to be broken, and Earth would have to face the consequences of what it had done so long ago. The countdown reached 0 on a Tuesday morning. The sky above Earth was clear and blue, and most people were going about their normal business. They had no idea that something massive was about to change their world forever. In the military command center, All eyes were on the monitoring screens. General Dae-jung sat in the commander's chair, monitoring everything. He was a stern man in his 60s, someone who had spent his entire life preparing for this moment, though he had not known it until recently. Detection on all sensors, a young officer announced. Large object entering the solar system at coordinates 730 Mark 210. Distance from Earth 200 million kilometers and closing. Dae-jung leaned forward. What is the size of the object? Massive, sir, the officer replied. Estimate is somewhere between 500 and 700 kilometers in length. It is a single vessel. Confirmed, a single vessel. That was what stunned everyone. Not an invasion fleet, not an armada of warships, but a single enormous ship. On the screens, they could see it now as the cameras zoomed in. It was like nothing that human technology had ever produced. It was elegant and strange, with curved surfaces that seemed to shift in the light, and it moved with purpose and confidence through space. All around the globe, similar scenes were playing out. Emergency broadcasts interrupted regular programming. Governments called emergency sessions. The United Nations assembled an emergency session. Military forces went to high alert. But something remarkable also happened. Instead of panic, many people responded with a strange calm. After weeks of knowing something was coming, after the truth had finally begun to spread through the world, people seemed almost relieved that the waiting was finally over. In the command center, Dae-jung looked at the screens and then at Hae-won, his chief engineer. Hae-won was a brilliant woman in her 40s, who had spent the last several weeks working with the military to understand architect technology. She had been studying old records and fragments of technology left behind from the original conflict. Can we stop it? Dae-jung asked. Hae-won shook her head slowly. No, sir. I have run every simulation. Our weapon systems are outdated compared to what we know about architect capabilities. But I need to tell you something else. Based on my analysis of their ship design and the way they are moving, I do not think they are here to attack. How can you be sure? Because if they wanted to attack, Hae-won said quietly, they would not have announced themselves with a countdown signal. They would have just arrived. The fact that they gave us warning suggests they want to communicate. At that exact moment, the ship transmitted something. Every radio frequency, every communication channel, every screen on Earth lit up simultaneously. A message was broadcasting, and it was in perfect English. The voice was calm and clear, neither male nor female, neither threatening nor friendly, just clear. This is Ramoth, representative of the architects. We have come to speak with the children of Earth. We mean you no harm. We come with a message and with choices. We will maintain our distance until you are ready to meet with us. The world held its breath. Humanity as a species had just been addressed by an alien civilization for the first time in 300 years. And this time, it was no longer a matter of government officials and military leaders. The entire world had heard the message. Everyone knew that something momentous was happening. Teo rushed to the command center where he met with Dae-jung and Yoon-ji. Together they decided that they needed to respond to Ramoth. Teo, as humanity's lead ambassador, recorded a message of greeting and peace. He told Ramoth that Earth welcomed the opportunity to communicate and that humanity wanted to move forward in understanding. Ramoth responded within minutes. We have been watching you for 300 years, the voice said. We have watched your wars and your healing. We have watched your cruelty and your kindness. We have watched you grow. We are prepared to meet with your representatives. Send them to the neutral station in orbit around your moon. We will meet you there in 12 hours. The next 12 hours were filled with frantic preparation. A team was assembled to travel to the orbital station. It included Teo as the lead diplomat, Hyun-ki as military representative and as someone who had lived through the original conflict, several scientists, and surprisingly, Mi-sun. Yoon-ji insisted that Mi-sun should go because she had started all of this by discovering the truth in the archives. As they traveled to the orbital station, Mi-sun stood at the window of the transport ship and looked at the massive architect vessel hanging in space. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. It was so much larger than anything humanity had ever built. It represented knowledge and power, and something that humanity had been too afraid to accept 300 years ago. When they arrived at the meeting point, they found that Ramoth was waiting for them. He appeared on a screen first, then in person stepped through a transport beam onto the station. Ramoth was roughly humanoid in shape, but clearly not human. His skin was smooth and pale, almost crystalline, and his eyes were large and dark like pools of still water. He moved with an elegant precision that suggested advanced control of his body. "Welcome," Ramoth said, and his voice was even calmer in person than it had been over the radio. "I am honored to meet with you. I have studied your species for many years. You are remarkable in your way. Despite your fear, despite your limitations, you continue to try. That is admirable." Teo stepped forward. "We welcome you to our system, Ramoth. We hope that we can establish peaceful relations between our peoples." "I am sure you do," Ramoth said. "But before we can speak of peace, we must first speak of the past. We must speak of what happened 300 years ago. We must speak of why your ancestors attacked us, why they used weapons to drive us from your world, and why your governments agreed to erase us from your memory." The room became very quiet. This was the moment that humanity had been dreading. This was the moment when the past would force its way into the present. "We know what we did," Teo said quietly. "We are not proud of it. We acted from fear. We did not understand your intentions. We made a terrible mistake." Ramoth studied Teo for a long moment. "Yes," he said finally. "You did. But that is not why I have come back. I have come back because I wanted to see if after 300 years, humanity had learned anything. I wanted to see if you had grown. I wanted to see if you were different now than you were then. And what have you concluded?" Mi-sun asked, surprising everyone by speaking up. Ramoth turned his attention to her. "I conclude," he said slowly, "that there is hope. There is definitely hope." Back on Earth, not everyone was pleased with the diplomatic approach. In military installations and in underground bunkers, different factions began making different plans. Some people, led by a man named Sang-He, believed that humanity should attack the architects before they had a chance to attack first. Sang-He was a political extremist who had spent years convincing military leaders and government officials that the only way to survive was to destroy the architects. "They will never forgive us for what we did," Sang-He told his followers in secret meetings. "They will never truly want peace. They are simply waiting for the right moment to destroy us. We must strike first. We must use their own technology against them." Sang-He had managed to get access to Heiwan's research on architect technology. He began planning a theft of military equipment and advanced weapons systems. His goal was simple: build a weapon powerful enough to damage or destroy the architect vessel before any peace talks could make him lose his opportunity. Meanwhile, on the other side of the debate there were people like Ho Sung, a famous pacifist diplomat, who believed that humanity should surrender completely to the architects and accept whatever terms they offered. Ho Sung gave speeches in major cities calling for total capitulation. He argued that any resistance was pointless and that humanity should simply accept the architects as superior beings and follow their guidance. But something unexpected happened. The ordinary people of Earth, the everyday humans who had no power in government and no military authority, began to react. They watched the debates between these two extreme positions and they became angry. Not angry at the architects, but angry at themselves. They were angry that their leaders had lied to them for 300 years. They were angry that they had been kept in the dark about their own history. They were angry that now they were being asked to either become slaves or start a war, with no option for something better. Massive protests erupted in every major city on Earth. Millions of people took to the streets demanding peace, demanding truth, and demanding that their leaders take a different path. They carried signs that said things like, "We can do better and peace is our choice and tell us the truth." The scale of the demonstrations was historic. It was the largest unified protest in human history. Sang-He's plans began to unravel when his followers abandoned him. The soldiers he had been depending on refused to steal military equipment. The scientists who had been helping him decided that they did not want to participate in an act of war. When Sang-He realized his rebellion was failing, he tried to act alone. He broke into a secure military facility and attempted to steal the technology he needed. But security caught him before he could complete his theft. He was arrested and his rebellion was over before it had truly begun. In the orbital station, Mi-sun continued to speak with Ramoth. She asked him directly why the architects had really come back. "Because we hoped you would change," Ramoth told her. 300 years ago we came to help you. We offered you knowledge and growth. But you were afraid of us. You were afraid that accepting help from us would make you less human. less independent, less yourselves. So you attacked us instead. That was wrong, Mi-sun said. We should not have done that. No, you should not have, Ramath agreed. But fear is powerful. Fear makes species do things they would not normally do. What matters is what happens after. Do you learn from your fear, or do you let it control you forever? Ramath then explained something that shocked everyone present. The architects are not actually very powerful anymore, he said. The weapon your ancestors used damaged us deeply. Our civilization has been fractured for 300 years. We are barely holding together. We are not here as conquerors. We are here because we are dying, and we hope that perhaps you might help us. We hope that perhaps we might learn from each other and build something new together. The revelation that the architects needed humanity as much as humanity might need them changed everything. It was no longer about a powerful alien species coming to take over or destroy. It was about two wounded civilizations potentially learning from each other. This information, when it spread to the world, seemed to settle something in humanity's heart. The anger that people had felt, which had been focused outward at the architects, was now directed inward. People became angry at their own governments for lying to them. They became angry at the systems that had allowed such secrecy to exist for so long. But they channeled that anger into something positive. A massive rally was organized in the United Nations Plaza. The entire world watched as Teo stood before millions of people gathered in person and billions watching on screens across the planet. He spoke of humanity's shame and humanity's opportunity. For 300 years, Teo said, his voice carrying across the world, we have hidden from our past. We have hidden from what we did. We have hidden from the truth. But we cannot hide anymore. We cannot pretend that this part of our history does not exist. We must face what we have done. We must own our mistakes. We must be brave enough to say we were wrong and we can do better. The crowd listened in complete silence. In that moment, something shifted in humanity's collective consciousness. The shame became not a reason to hide, but a reason to change. The fear became not a reason to attack, but a reason to reach out. Hyun-ki, the old military commander, stood beside Teo on the platform. He was crying, though he was trying to hide it. He spoke about his experiences during the original war, about the guilt he had carried for 300 years, about how much he had wanted to tell the truth, but had been forbidden to do so. I spent 3 centuries watching this secret eat away at my conscience, Hyun-ki said. Do not make the same mistake I did. Do not spend your lives running from the truth. Face it, learn from it, become better because of it. The rally lasted for hours. People from every nation on Earth came together with a single message to their leaders. We want peace. We want truth. We want to be better than we were. By the next morning, Earth's government had made its decision. Humanity would not attack the architects. Humanity would not surrender to them. Instead, humanity would offer them something else. Partnership. True partnership between equals. Not teacher and student, not conqueror and conquered, but two species working together to create something new. It was a remarkable moment in history. For the first time, humanity had looked at something frightening and complex, and instead of running away, had run toward it with courage and the determination to do better than they had done before. The final meeting between humanity and the architects took place in a special chamber that had been constructed in orbit around Earth. It was a neutral space, designed to make both species comfortable. Large windows looked out onto the stars, a constant reminder of the vastness of space and the smallness of individual pride and fear. Ramath arrived with a delegation of 5 other architects. They were beautiful in an alien way, each slightly different from the others, but all carrying the same air of ancient wisdom and quiet strength. Teo led the human delegation, which included scientists, philosophers, military leaders, and young people who represented humanity's future. Hai-sun stood close to her father, her eyes taking in every detail of the architects. She was already thinking about how to document this moment for future generations. We have come to a decision, Ramath said as the meeting began. We have decided to trust you. We have decided to believe that humanity is capable of change, of growth, and of becoming something greater than you were before. Teo stepped forward. And we have come to understand something important, he said. We understand that accepting help from others does not make us weak, it makes us wise. The architects have offered us partnership, and we accept with humility and with genuine hope for what we can build together. But there is something you must know first, Ramoth said. He activated a holographic display that showed the history of the architect's civilization. Our people have been fractured for 300 years because of the weapon your ancestors used. We are not unified. We are not strong. Our civilization is struggling to survive. If we come together with you, it is not because we are superior beings coming to help inferior ones. It is because two broken peoples have discovered that perhaps together they can become whole. One of the other architects stepped forward. Her name was Ne-Ala, and she was younger than Ramoth, with a gentler presence. I want to tell you something, she said, and her voice had a warmth to it that surprised the humans. For 300 years my people have studied yours. We have watched you build cities and tear them down. We have watched you make peace and then make war. We have watched you hurt each other and then help each other. What we have learned is that your species has something remarkable. You have the ability to change. You have the ability to admit when you are wrong. That is rare, and that is beautiful. As the meeting continued, the two species began to understand each other better. The architects explained that they had spent 300 years in isolation, healing from their wounds and studying the universe. They had not been waiting to attack. They had been waiting to see if humanity would grow up, would mature, would become capable of the kind of partnership they were offering. An architect named Kelvor shared something personal. I lost my family in the war, he said quietly. I lost people I loved because your ancestors were afraid. For a long time I hated your species, but then I started to watch you. I watched you struggle with your own violence. I watched you try to create peace. I watched you grieve for the people you had hurt. And I realized that hate was not going to help anyone. It was only going to continue the cycle of pain. During a break in the formal meeting, Mi-sun found herself talking with Ramoth. She asked him why he had specifically come back now, why he had counted down those exact 40 days. Because that is how long it takes for most species to choose, Ramoth said. Most species, when faced with something unknown, need exactly that amount of time to make a decision about their future. We knew that if you were ready for partnership, after 40 days, then you were probably ready for real change. If you were not ready by then, you would never be ready. And you were right, Mi-sun said. We needed exactly that time. On the screens in command centers across Earth, people watched as the formal treaties were being prepared. These would not be treaties of dominance or submission. They would be treaties of cooperation and mutual growth. The architects agreed to share certain knowledge with humans, but only at a pace that humanity could absorb. Humans agreed to help the architects rebuild their fragmented civilization, sharing their unique perspective and approach to solving problems. But perhaps most importantly, both species agreed to something revolutionary. They agreed that their partnership would be one of equals. Neither species would be governed by the other. Neither species would have to give up their independence or their identity. Instead, they would work together while remaining separate, combining their strengths while respecting their differences. Ye-jun, a man who lived in the outer colonies, watched all of this unfold on his communication screen. He had a secret that he had been keeping for his entire life. His family was descended from architects who had tried to preserve their knowledge in human form, creating hybrid children before the war had separated the species forever. Ye-jun decided that now was the time to share this secret. He traveled to the orbital station and revealed his ancestry to both Tayo and Ramoth. Instead of causing problems, Ye-jun's revelation became a symbol of what could be possible. Here was proof that the two species could literally blend together, could create new forms of life that carried the essence of both. It was a living example of what partnership could mean. When Hyun-ki saw Ye-jun's family history, the old commander finally allowed himself to let go of the guilt he had been carrying for so long. He understood, in that moment, that the war was truly over. Not just in a military sense, but in a spiritual sense. The anger was gone. The shame was being transformed into something constructive. The final ceremony took place on Earth itself, at the location where Tayo had spoken to the masses just days before. Ramoth and 5 other architects stood on the platform next to Tayo, Yoonji, Hyun-ki, Mi-sun, and dozens of other representatives of human achievement and diversity. Millions of people gathered in person, with billions more watching through screens and holographic displays across the world. Ramoth extended his hand to Teo. The gesture was simple but profound. In most human cultures, a handshake represented agreement, respect, and friendship. Ramoth had learned this and deliberately chose to make this gesture. "We begin again," Ramoth said. "Not from where we left off 300 years ago, but from where we are today. We begin as partners. We begin as equals. We begin with hope." Teo took the offered hand. The two beings, so different in appearance and background, stood together as representatives of a new era in history. Later that evening, long after the ceremonies had ended and the crowds had dispersed, Teo sat, with his daughter Misun on a rooftop overlooking the city. The sky was filled with stars, and in the distance they could see the lights of the architect vessel, still orbiting peacefully. "Do you remember when I told you that some things should not be spoken about?" Teo asked his daughter. "I remember," Misun said. "I was wrong about that," Teo said. "Some things must be spoken about. Some truths must be faced. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us capable of change." A young girl, no more than 6 years old, approached them. Her name was Kira, and she was born in a colony on Mars. "Excuse me," she said politely to Teo. "I heard people talking about the architects. Why do people say we don't talk about them? They seem very nice." Teo smiled at the child and gathered her close. "We don't talk about them," he said, gently. "Not because they are bad or because we are ashamed. We don't talk about them because we are finally becoming worthy of them. And every single day we must choose to remain that way. We must choose to be better, kinder, and braver than we were before. That is the real lesson of the architects." Kira nodded, even though she did not fully understand. But she would understand someday when she was older. She would understand that her generation had inherited a gift. Not just the knowledge and technology of the architects, but the knowledge that change was possible, that forgiveness was real, and that even the deepest wounds could heal if two species were willing to try. And as the sun set over Earth and the stars came out to fill the sky, a new chapter in the history of both species began. Not a chapter of dominance or fear, but a chapter of partnership, growth, and hope.